And so with the crocodiles, it's also, the rivers, they live in the rivers, and people also use those rivers for water. And so that's where these encounters are happening, where essentially people are scrambling for the same resources. Roughly over 100,000 people die as a result of wildlife encounters.
Hey, I'm Ikra, and this is What in the World from the BBC World Service. Today's episode has a lot of wildlife in it, so before we get into it, I thought I would give you a bit of a quiz question. It's about one of my favourite animals. It's about elephants. And the question is, how many hours per day do you think elephants spend eating? I've got three options. Option A, 6 to 8 hours. Option B, 10 to 12 hours. Option C, 12 to 18 hours. Pause now if you need some time to think. You've been warned, because the answer is, drum roll, C. Well done if you got it. Up to 18 hours a day eating. That's a long time. You can imagine they need a lot of space to be doing that too. Sometimes it's a bit of a fight for that space, and that's what we're going to be getting into today. That struggle for food, water, survival, land that can happen between animals and humans. We're also going to be hearing about some of the solutions people are coming up with to all of this too. Let's get into it. Shingai Nyoka is our reporter in Zimbabwe. She's on the line right now. Hey, Shingai.
Hey, how are you?
Yes, I'm not bad. Shingai, I'm really interested to hear about this human-animal conflict encounters. When we say human-wildlife encounters, what do we mean by that? What does that look like?
Well, this is a commonly used term that describes encounters between people and wildlife. And those encounters normally result in some form of loss. So, for example, animals might raid a farmer's field and destroy the crops and consume those crops. Or predators might go into a kraal and feed on the goats and the livestock. And what we're seeing increasingly, especially in countries like Zimbabwe, is there's also an increasing death toll related to that. And so more and more people are dying as a result of these encounters.
And so we'll get onto the deaths in a moment, but how much of an issue is crop destruction?
Well, it's pretty large, and not just looking at countries like Zimbabwe, but in places like Kenya, for example, where the government has already set up some form of compensation for when elephants, primates like monkeys move into a field and destroy all the crop. Last year, they spent about $4 million compensating farmers for the loss of their crops. And so it's a really big problem, especially here in Africa, where many of the people live off the land.
We heard about that extreme example of people dying sometimes from these wildlife encounters. I wondered if we could break that down a little bit more and get into some of the stats about this. So globally, around the world, how many people are dying from these sort of encounters?
Well, the figures vary, but roughly over 100,000 people die as a result of wildlife encounters. And, I don't want to be dramatic, but that's almost like, a couple of jumbo jets crashing a couple of times a week. And the biggest cause of death is snakes. So snake bites account for about 100,000 deaths. And then you have crocodiles, which account for about 1,000, and then elephants and hyenas, which account for about 500, and lions, which are very common in this part of the world, about 250 people a year. It's given rise to a lot of deaths of the wild animals themselves in retaliation. And so there's this ongoing conflict that governments are really trying to grapple with to handle.
And people might be listening and thinking, where is this happening? Where is this happening?
In countries like Zimbabwe and in Africa, where a lot of the wildlife conflict happens, it's normally close to national parks and conservancies. And so, Zimbabwe, for example, and countries like Botswana are almost victims of their own success, is that they have these huge wildlife populations that they've housed in these national parks. But then you also have communities that live and share borders with these animals. And so a lot of the conflict, a lot of the encounters that are happening with people that live in close proximity to the animals.
Yeah, and I know there's been a study all about Zimbabwe and fatal attacks happening on people in Zimbabwe, right? Just tell us a little bit more about those findings.
The Zimparks, which is the national authority which looks after wildlife as well as the national parks, they recorded an increase of about a quarter. So 60 people were killed last year by wildlife, and many of these are hyena attacks, crocodile attacks, as well as elephant attacks. And the number is increasing. So, 60 people dead, about 80 people injured. And livestock, I think they said about 800 animals were killed by predators, and that's almost double. And I mean, just to broaden it out a little bit, if you look at a country like Kenya, over the last 2 years to about 2025, they recorded about 225 people that died. That was almost about 100 people a year that were being killed.
And so why are animals like elephants attacking people?
I think in a phrase, they call it habitat loss. And what that means essentially is that there's a growing number of elephants, and those elephants are moving into communities to try to find food. And on the other hand, you also have growing populations. And so, the higher the number of people living in the communities, the more livestock that they have. And so they tend to move closer to these game parks, closer to what you call the corridors, the migration routes that the elephants move through as they move from country to country in search of food. And so, there's almost like a competition for food. And so with the crocodiles, it's also, the rivers, they live in the rivers, and people also use those rivers for water. And so that's where these encounters are happening, where essentially people are scrambling for the same resources.
So it sounds like it's not only the humans being affected by this, the wildlife is losing out too, right?
Absolutely. And if you look at the number of animals that were killed in Zimbabwe, for example, the national park said that it neutralized, that's the word that it used, about 500 problem animals last year. Conflict comes when the elephants move into an area, or the lions move into an area and they kill goats, and then the communities go out there in retaliation to try to neutralize these animals. The animals don't really have anywhere to go anymore. The people really don't have anywhere to go anymore because the space is just shrinking.
Just talk me through a little bit about these communities that are most affected. What sort of things are they doing, to protect themselves, to protect the environment too?
Well, there are a lot of solutions. It's not like a one size fits all. And so in some of the communities that we visited, where we've heard stories. I remember there was one story that I went to do near the Hwange National Park. Hwange is one of the largest national parks in Southern Africa. It has 3 times the number of elephants that the park can sustain. The elder of the village was telling me that, that household, there was a death there recently. That person was mauled by a lion. That person was trampled. And so what they've done is they've set up some projects. Some of it includes tagging the elephants or the lions to track where they are. They're what they call early warning systems, where you have community guards that move around tracking where the animals are so that they can alert the villagers. They also have what they call chili bombs for the lions. And there are electric fences that they've put around some of the crawls to protect the animals.
What are the governments of Uganda, Zimbabwe, what are they saying about all this? Are they coming up with any solutions as well as the people?
Well, there's a cause for concern, and especially after this Zimbabwe report was released. And what the government is trying to do now is to set up a compensation fund. This is a model which has been replicated in other parts of the continent where a farmer might lose their crop overnight. And so the government is setting up a fund where they compensate people for injuries, where they compensate them for crops. And so the government is also trying to set up conservancies to make sure that the communities are also benefiting from the animals that live around them. In Hwange, the biggest national park, they're trying to drill water holes so that the animals don't have to leave the park as often to try to go into the communities in search of water.
And we wanted to hear from someone working on a solution, so let's have a listen.
Human-wildlife conflict has been a challenge, and it has been affecting people in many ways, including death. We are most challenged with the human-elephant conflict because we have quite big number of elephants and surrounded with many protected areas. When animals, these especially the elephants, move out of the protected areas, they come closer to community area, affecting people in many ways. WWF has been working very closely with the government to find solutions. One is making sure that there is a proper incident reporting framework, which we have put in place, and now the villagers can just report the incidents direct to the villages and making sure that decisions are made through the village. And if much more effort is needed, then it's escalated to the district level. But we have also established the local rapid response teams. These are village game scouts just at the village, and they are well trained on how to do the elephant monitoring, but also response when it comes that elephant are coming closer to the village, but also recording all these kind of incidences on incident report books. Wherever there are signs of elephant coming to the village, these guys are there to make sure that they alert the fellow community members. On top of that, we have also started some school programs to make sure that we raise awareness on the do's and don'ts when it comes to elephants.
Shingai, it's been so good to hear about the issue, but also how communities are coming together to really come up with solutions to all this too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's it for today. I'm Ikra. This is What's in the World from the BBC World Service. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can comment, like, and subscribe anytime. Also on Instagram at BBC What in the World over there. And I'll see you next time. Bye.